Aaron Alberts, VP of Customer Success at Acerta. We recently ran a customer contest where we asked customers, what impact has LinePulse had in your plant? The answers surprised us. We heard from some folks, quality managers, process engineers, that they had solved single issues that ended up saving them $16,000 per day or $200,000 in one-time savings, $700,000 for solving another single issue. And these are just, one or two things that happened throughout the entire year amongst a variety of other problems they solved. Yet we still see hesitation sometimes from plant leadership investing in tools like this. So I'm curious because you talk to customers every day, and when you speak to them before they buy, why do you think it's so hard for plants to estimate the ROI of a quality or analytics platform?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. Not everybody's reasons are the same, but I think that it generally falls into a couple of groups. I think it's important not to discount inertia in these things. So like a lot of our customers are accustomed to using certain tools, Excel, Minitab, things that they learned in school or have just, spent the last 20, 30 years using to analyze their problems. And clinging to familiar ways of doing things is easy, right? And it's comfortable, and nobody gets in trouble for that because those are the tools that you've been given. I think that there's also an element of, because of the use of tools like Minitab and Excel, where you had to go out and get the data manually, you're accustomed to having an environment where the line is broken up into pieces and people manage individual pieces of the quality on the line. And so they're used to looking at their problems a little bit in isolation. And so suddenly being presented with the option to look at the big picture and how everything in the plant interacts with the thing that you're doing can feel really overwhelming, can feel sort of like, just not even really sure what to do with that much information. Or I've even seen in some cases where there's a great hesitance to have that type of visibility because it may expose problems that are otherwise hidden in the facility, which was a really interesting conversation to have with that team. But one of the most common ones that we come across, I think, is that it's difficult when you look at problems in isolation. It's difficult to understand the entire cost of poor quality for the organization. So how your quality issues on your particular segment or area of manufacturing facility has an impact on what's happening downstream, and how other people's that are upstream from you impact yours. So, without having the full view of the cost of poor quality, it's easy to say like, well, for my portion that I'm looking at, this is how much we're spending to manage quality on an annual basis, without knowing the complete picture. I think the other thing is that nobody's ever asked them to do this before. Other software tools that they're using, Excel comes with Office 365, which everybody's got. Minitab is intrinsic to all manufacturing organizations. Nobody had to make the decision to buy that. Other things like, their MES system or their SCADA systems, ERP systems, those are all managed by IT. And the ROI calculations for those aren't even done in a lot of cases anymore. It's just assumed you must have these things for modern manufacturing environment. So they don't know how to calculate ROI for it because of a lot of the other things we said. They don't have the visibility into everything that's going on. They don't even know the buckets of cost savings that they might put into a calculation for ROI. So I think there's a lot of things working against our customers, for trying to come up with a reasonable ROI calculation for a tool like this.
Mm. I can definitely understand a lot of those constraints on the shop floor and how they may not have had a look at those numbers to, look at the total cost of poor quality. But yet, we do know that they frequently encounter these big issues that cost a lot of money, whether it be in warranty claims or in quality spills prevented in the factory. And plant managers will still say they can't afford to spend a single dollar on preventative technology. Why do you think that disconnect exists?
Well, um, I think that when we are in the process of presenting our solution to new potential customers, when you show them something like $700,000 saved on a single instance, or $200,000 saved, $16,000 saved a day for a single problem, um, those numbers sound enormous. And I think that people have a tendency to discount those numbers as sales numbers, if you will, right? Not actual feedback that we've gotten from customers. Um, and there's a little bit of it's too good to be true. There's no way that that's possible. I also think that people have a tendency to discount the value of incremental gains, right? So one of the things that we often hear from our customers after the installation of our tool is, we didn't realize how much time was spent getting the data, orchestrating it into a method we could use, visualizing it, analyzing it. We simply didn't recognize how much time we were spending doing that.
Mm,
And so if you don't have a good visibility into how much time your team, is spending on finding and getting the data, then solving problems in a much faster way. If you already think that you're pretty efficient in that, us coming to you and saying you'll become efficient at solving problems sounds like something you already are doing. And so it can be challenging, I think, for people to see the value in those small, even efficiency gains sometimes, of not having to walk through your whole building and collect all the data when your machines are off or in bypass or whatever, and bringing it back to your desk. All the stuff that a lot of our customers started doing and have been doing for a long time. So I also think that manufacturers encounter a very wide variety of problems in their everyday. So some are small and some are big, and sometimes they're small and big. The fire hose of problems that comes at people can be quite drenching at times. So it can be hard, even when you've had a significant quality impact last year. I think there's a tendency for people, a natural human tendency, to say, well, whew, we're through that. That's over. We don't have to worry about that anymore, right? Forgetting about, that you still don't have an underlying understanding in many cases of what led to that problem in the first place. So you think you're through it, but actually it could be that you're just in the eye of the hurricane and the other side's coming right back to get you, right? If you don't have that understanding, you can look forward and say, we got a lot of orders coming in this year, we're super efficient. We're not going to have that quality problem again, probably. So yeah, this is going to be a great year. And if you don't sort of look at the data historically and say, what kind of problems are we having year over year, month over month? Do we understand why they're happening? Do we have a plan to make it so that they stop happening? Do we have containment around the issues that are causing these things in the first place? Then you're just, you're kind of like the horse on the farm that's just being asked to look forward so you don't get spooked by the things around you,
right.
and it's very challenging to predict what, as we all know, what the future holds. So
Absolutely. And even when a plant does solve one of these major issues and they save a lot of money, why doesn't that value get recognized as a return on investment?
So this one actually, it surprised me a little, the feedback that we've gotten from our customers. The the predominant thinking in our industry today is that cost avoidance is not return on investment. So
Mm.
if you have avoided the cost, great, but where is that money? If you say that you avoided $200,000 worth of scrap this year or rework this year, show me where that is in this additional $200,000 is in our company bank account. And I think that you know, because those savings are just sort of absorbed into the general budget, you can get to the end of the year and engineering can be saying, man, thank goodness we had this tool. Look at all of this money we saved. And the finance side of it can say, I don't see where we saved any money. We said we were going to spend X and we spent X. Right.
Right.
So there's just there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think, between how people think about cost avoidance versus actual spend. It would be very simple to look at it at the end of the year. If that quality issue had happened and you had a budget of X and now you're at X plus $200,000, that's a clear overage. But
Mhm.
saving it in the first place doesn't somehow translate to an, I don't know if it's the word underage, savings. So
Yeah.
I think it's tricky sometimes for the teams to think about how to present those savings to their leadership, people making the decisions on whether to use the software.
With some of these costs of poor quality being unexpected, it's often not known how many big issues and expensive issues are going to happen in the upcoming year. Would you consider purchasing something like LinePulse as an insurance policy?
Um, I don't love thinking about it as an insurance policy, although I don't think it's a completely wrong way to think about it. I think it's important to understand that it can evolve into something like an insurance policy. So, when we think about with in the States, as we think about the insurance policies that everybody has, you use your medical insurance pretty regularly. But like your homeowner's insurance and car insurance, hopefully you're not using those very often. LinePulse is not a tool that you should purchase to sit on a shelf for when the plant catches on fire. It's something that before the plant catches on fire, if you don't know how to use the tool, you've done the work, with our team to make sure it's configured properly for you, you're watching these signals, right? Like you're doing the work to understand everything that contributes to this. Then when you do have something come up, you're in a good position to solve that problem quickly with a limited impact to the rest of your production environment. So once you have that understanding and you have the algorithms watching the things in your facility for you that matter, and they matter, and you've validated with the team that these are the things that matter, right? And you just have it working in the background, then you can start to think about it, I think, as a bit of an insurance policy, right? I can go do these other things. Maybe insurance policy, it's a safety net, right? I can
Mhm.
go do these other things because Mr. Roboto AI over here is watching the rest of the organization and will tell me when I need to focus on a problem that is starting to arise, starting to impact production. So, the hope is that you're using the platform to de-risk your operations. So I think a safety net is probably a better way to think about it than insurance. We want people using the platform. They need to be using the platform to get the full benefit from it. And for the most part, when people talk about insurance, at least the people that sell me insurance are saying, this is something you're never going to use, but you should have it. And that's not really, how we explain it to our customers.
Right, right. Insurance, safety nets, preventative technology, these aren't exactly the things that people are usually clamoring to spend money on. But why do you think manufacturers should focus more on investing these tools to avoid risk?
Yeah. Well, I think if you were to ask most people in manufacturing that have been there for, more than a couple of days, they'll tell you that the cost associated with poor quality is something that varies month to month, quarter to quarter, right? Sort of like a sine wave, hopefully. Hopefully there's lows and not just highs, but there's some months where your cost of poor quality is very high and some months where it's back down to within, you know, what you would consider to be acceptable ranges. So having a tool like LinePulse allows you to start smoothing those things out and making the size of those waves smaller. And so as the waves get smaller, you have more time and more money to focus on solving some of these other problems so that over time the waves continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And that makes your manufacturing operations a lot more predictable. So both from a manpower perspective and from a cost of goods sold perspective and from a predictability to your customer, right? Sometimes when you have those months where your cost of poor quality is high and you're reworking half the parts coming off the line and you're scrapping a quarter of the parts coming off the line, like one of the big things you're focused on is making sure you don't shut your customer down. And if your manufacturing environment becomes a lot more predictable, some of those low level stresses that exist in your life start to go away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron, for answering my questions today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.